Digital debris, strategies for the life and death of PDFs. Not my best title, but got the point across because you're here. So I am Dave. I'm a certified content strategy master, whatever that means. And I've worked in higher ed and government for over 20 years now. Been a Drupal user since 2016. These are some of the places I've worked or clients that I work with. I'm going to start with a poll, okay? Is everybody able to raise their hand or indicate in some way? Have you ever created a PDF? Excellent. Okay, I'd be worried if that wasn't true. Have you posted a PDF on a website? All right. How many have tested a PDF for accessibility? All right, that's good. That's at least half. How many of you have audited the number of PDFs on your website? Okay, getting a little smaller. How many of you have audibly sighed when you had to open a PDF on your phone just to order a meal? Excellent. Okay. So I think we're on the same page, no pun intended, about a lot of things here. Let's get into talking about PDFs. I want to talk about why PDFs exist, and PDFs versus the internet. We're going to get a little into looking at the impact then of PDFs on everything, and deliver some practical tactics for now and the future. I think for whatever reason, I became obsessed with PDFs over the past year, and I think they might be the most misused, but also misunderstood file format on the internet. So just to level set, what do we talk about when we talk about PDFs? Well, technically, they are a file format standard, and they're designed to allow for the presentation of documents independent of the application software, or operating system, or hardware. This is, by the way, from the PDF Association, pdfa.org, which is sort of the technical community for PDF standard, sort of the Drupalists of PDFs. They're very into open source solutions for this PDF standard. They describe this as a way to encapsulate a complete description of a fixed document and the information needed to display it. So essentially, a PDF is like a DOM for a document, right? Real quick, let's go through some common PDF use cases. All right, there you go. I think you get the idea. PDFs are everywhere. Probably the single most popular and most versatile document you can use. Pop quiz, any guesses? What would be the dimensions of the largest possible PDF document you could create with Adobe Acrobat? Anyone want to guess? Adobe Acrobat does have a limit, but technically there is not a limit. Good question.
Inches or pixels?
Think bigger. How about really, really, really big? The limit in Adobe Acrobat is 381 kilometers squared. That's about 56,027 miles. You could print a one-to-one map of Georgia basically over the entire state. You might call this a BF PDF. So, PDFs are not just for printing, a common misconception. And especially now, thanks to work like that PDF organization, you can do a lot with a PDF I wasn't even aware of. You can do complete 3D CAD model specs contained fully inside a PDF and interact with the model in your PDF reader. I did this in Adobe Acrobat. This wasn't special software. Those of you who read Hacker News may be aware that you can also do stupid little things like run Doom in a PDF or a complete Linux install in PDF, as long as you open it in the Chrome browser right now. So, as I said, I've been thinking about PDFs a lot. This is sort of my mind map of what I've been thinking about and how things relate. You can see it goes from thinking about both the software we use, the technology underlying that software. There are relationships between how it's used in technology to create documents, which is this blue sphere over here, a lot of how we think about the print medium behind PDFs. But I'm mostly going to focus on this connection between that document space and the web content space. Because I asked myself, okay, PDFs are amazing, clearly, but how did they become so complex and yet so ubiquitous? So let's look at why do PDFs exist? A little bit of a history lesson here. The PDF turned 30 a couple years ago. I didn't even know that it was that long, but time flies, I guess, when content calls. They, as you may know, were originally just created to solve a graphic design problem. And if those of you who don't know the 80s or before, graphic design used to be a completely manual process. You had to literally cut and paste paper or images onto a board, and then it would be photographed, and that could be duplicated, and that's how you got a graphic design for an advertisement, for a brochure, whatever it might be. 1982, Adobe Systems is formed with the development of what they call PostScript, which is one of the first popular languages to describe a page that could tell a computer how to print this, and the printer could interpret that information. Now, this was not a big deal to a lot of people, except this guy named Steve Jobs happened to see this technology and said, hey, I like that, I want to use that, I want to help you develop that for my new computer, which in 1984 turned out to be the Macintosh, which was one of the first platforms to include PostScript natively within its system. This, also with the graphic design software, that was a new thing within the Macintosh system, suddenly took hold. Go through a couple years, they add a laser writer printer, new software like PageMaker comes along, and suddenly drag and drop becomes a thing. And by 1985 to roughly 1992, you get this explosion of what we come to know now as desktop publishing. But I have to emphasize, it wasn't this too long ago, within many of our lifetimes, this was a revolution. Because you're talking about people suddenly realize I can use a computer to create and design a document. Previously, the only thing I had to do was go to a typewriter on pre-printed letterhead, and suddenly now I'm able to type in multiple fonts on infinite paper, endless opportunities to revise and change this thing before it's physical. This was how we changed people's thinking about the relationship between what a document is and how I use a computer to create these. The thing is that now I can think about how something looks, and that is more important to me than it previously was as a document creator, but my mental model remains in documents. And if you think about it, we still have web pages because this mental model still exists in how we think about content and information. So, desktop publishing takes hold, but another revolution, as we know, is coming. Roughly 1993, the internet as we know it, the World Wide Web, starts to come through. So, quick timeline here. 1993 is the first version of the portable document format we know as PDF. And Adobe tries to make this available to anybody who's using their system, but they also start to figure out how can we make this free, because we want people to use it. This is at the same time that the Mosaic browser comes out, the same year, which was the first graphical user web browser. HTML becomes a thing that people start to be interested in with this graphic user interface, right? Now, let's go ahead a year and just look at how these two things come together. By 1994, you've got a year of adoption of the PDF, with these people already in this document creation mindset. if I want to do something as a regular person with a PDF, I can suddenly provide consistent design, control of the colors and fonts. I can handle image files and resolution. They're easy to build and manage, easy to collaborate on, easy to share. I can send them across the country because they're electronic files. Compared to HTML and building early web pages, many of you may remember, if you could code, then you could create something that was mostly text, plus maybe some basic shapes and colors. Image resolution was not great. Many of you may remember the book that explained how you do layouts with tables. That kind of blew people's minds. And you could be on the internet, but you couldn't guarantee that what you created was going to look the same for everybody. Okay? So that's 1994. Just a couple of years later, in 1996, the revised version of PDF suddenly allows me to do interactive page elements, including our favorite, the interactive fill-in forms on a PDF, right? I'm getting now data from a PDF document that I can use and intake into my business process, whatever it could be. If I wanted to do that on a website, I barely had CSS coming out at this time. And form builders, these electronic ways of getting information and input fields were still very new and inconsistent and unstandard. So 1996, Netscape 2 comes out, JavaScript. By this time now we have HTML, we have CSS, we have JavaScript. But who understands how to actually use that is a very small group. So desktop publishing is way ahead. From 1985 to 1996, it has a head start before we get to something like the Netscape system that people want. And way before we get suddenly, I'm going to say roughly 1998, because that's when I start to remember it, of now people understand there's this World Wide Web that I can go to and look, there's money to be made. That's when suddenly, okay, the web is going to be an interesting place to start bringing documents and design. But that 10-year head start is significant. In that time that it took for the web pages to do what PDFs could do, organizations had taken that time to build workflows and invest and had people working around PDFs and this idea of a document that I'm creating. So as a result, that transition to providing content for a first website that an organization would have, roughly within that space, let's say 98 to 2004, that means, well, let's take all these PDFs we created and we'll put them on the internet so that we have an internet presence, right? So, and especially if that content was, well, you know the drill, just about anything that you can think of that was correspondence, flyers, legal documents, permits, leases, and let's not forget almost any form that they'd ever created, right? This is the birth of what I think of as digital debris. Let's put it out there, and let's just keep putting it out there, and nobody's talking about what happens to it. So now, PDFs are the plastic of the internet. They made a lot of things possible, but we never thought about how long they'd be around. So what's the impact of PDFs on everything? Cut to today, we actually just, within the last few years, PDFs are one of the top 3 most abundant file formats online. This graph shows how frequently they show up in Google searches as what Google sees on the internet. And according to the, I want to make sure I read this right, Common Crawl, they do a regular MIME type table, and PDF is, at least last time I checked, was the 3rd most popular file format on the web, only behind HTML and XML. They are more popular than JPEGs, PNGs, or GIF files. Adobe says there are at least 3 trillion PDFs in the world. To give a scale to that, if we assume that each PDF nicely was one single letter-sized page, it would take approximately 360 million trees to create that paper for those pages. And we could take those 3 trillion sheets and put them end to end from Earth to Mars, round trip, twice. Storing those PDFs right now is estimated to require about 150 terabytes of data. That means about 2.5 metric tons of carbon dioxide to run the data centers for that much memory through a year. That's the equivalent of 6,300 miles in a gas-powered car, or approximate emissions of 1 round-trip transatlantic flight per passenger. But as we know now, PDFs are everywhere because they were so easy to make from anything. This little cartoon, the caption, if you can't read it, it says, "I'm sorry, Derek, but now that Kelsey has learned how to convert JPEGs into PDF, we can't justify keeping you on." Making web pages, for a lot of people, still feels like more work if they're stuck in a document mindset. And the bad habit of websites in general is this tendency to just create and publish and move on, create and publish and move on. And along the same time, as good stewards of website, we're constantly changing them to make them better. We're eliminating content as we go. And the result of that now is that a lot of online content disappears. This is a Pew Research report from 2024. It said 38% of web pages that existed in 2013 are no longer accessible a decade later. Within news pages, trusted sources, 23% of links were broken. And Wikipedia pages have at least 54% with one link, at least one link in their references pointing to a page that no longer exists. And for my fellow government peeps, 21% of government pages contain at least one broken link. And I want to highlight that that highest peak is in city and county governments. It's not even federal government. It's the smaller groups that have fewer people to support them. So in comparison, PDFs feel safe to people. If information is valuable, it's required to be retained. People trust a PDF more than HTML. Think about all the PDFs that I know you have, we all have, of like your health or financial records, you and your family. You store those as PDFs. I don't think you want to store those as HTML right now, right? There's something about a PDF that we feel secure. So it's the same at scale. In healthcare, finance, higher ed, business, research, government, they trust PDFs to keep information intact. And of course, we trust in PDFs so much that potentially millions of them have been created, stored, and never viewed. This was a report from the World Bank. They did an internal report on their own content about what reports are widely read. Of course, they released that report as a PDF. They found more than 31% of their policy reports are never downloaded. That's a third, right? And almost 87% were never cited. So they may have been downloaded, but you can't even know if they actually read them, right? The Washington Post, in response to this, said the solutions to all our problems may be buried in PDFs that nobody reads. That same week in the Washington Post, they reported on this story from Congress about the reports that they insist be made and sent to Congress that they don't know why they're being asked to. It's a little hard to read from here, but they counted 4,291 reports that were required from hundreds of agencies across government and even some private groups. Some of those are never turned in, and some that are still ignored and wind up in the trash. So this keeps happening all the time because we got into this idea of thinking about information as documents and proof that something has been done. So while they may be one of the most versatile file formats, we know that they are not web pages. So the greatest strength of a PDF is also its greatest weakness. PDF content is permanent once it is shared. Now that's with some, technically there are some things, but basically from the moment you share a PDF, its usefulness begins to degrade, the information can become accurate, time-bound content expires, and links break. There's very little you can do to stop that because sometimes you're linking to something that's on a website that you can't control. So what happens to the user experience here? A link is a promise. So broken content means broken trust. Now you can say, oh, I guess we'll just work around the broken content and we do our best to manage the stuff that we can control, right? No. Please no. That's why we're here, to learn how to do better, right? So I would say PDFs are content. Let's have a content strategy. It's just that simple. Okay, let's give you some practical tactics, because hopefully I think that's why you're here, right? So, consensus is now PDFs are the worst, but I say, and hopefully you've seen, not all of them are bad. There's really only two kinds of PDFs in the world. There are the PDFs you make with your content. There are the PDFs that somebody else makes with your content. So one of these is talking about content strategy. The other is user experience. Let's start with that second one. What can you do about this? The PDFs that others make with your content. Let's call that second generation PDF content. So this might be something that I take either, the simple one would be OCR. That's probably the most popular. It's something that somebody made and I turned it into a PDF by scanning it, whether that's a document archive, a book, okay? Screen grabs from a website that I put into a document, downloaded images from your website, copied and pasted content, or I print to PDF from your web page. These are the most common things that I could think of. All of these are related, especially the last one, and the downloading images, copied and pasted content, print as PDF. There are technical ways to make those better experiences so that you might not be able to control how things are used, but you can do a lot more to help control how the results look if somebody makes a PDF out of those things. So when it comes to building better web pages, you want to remember that you are not your user, and think about accessibility and the needs of a variety, especially the edge cases of people who want to use things in a way that might not occur to you, but it's really important to them. All websites should be accessible to all users. That's just a default. That automatically makes PDFs used with it, or anything made with your content better. Optimization of your website performance, is more valuable to more people than customization of content that is locked into a PDF that you provide. So the easier it is for your web content creators to make really good web pages, then the less they will hesitate to do it. This comes down to accessibility as well. There are multiple options for multiple needs. I'm going to go into a few Drupal-specific things here, but caveat, I am not a developer. I do not build with Drupal. I have just used Drupal as a content creator. So I'm going to offer some of my initial thoughts, but I'm happy to get into questions later. So a module like editorially, who's using editorially? Awesome. Sits in there when I'm making content, and it's checking me as I go before I even hit publish, right? So there's an early check on creating content. You can also make sure that you are doing the work of auditing your stuff regularly. A rot audit is the easiest. That's ROT, redundant, obsolete, or trivial. Find that content that can be removed. Also look at installing tools that do this automated monitoring for you in the background. So Site Improve, Acquia Optimize, those are popular ones being used here. They can look for broken links, they can do accessibility standard checks, and they can do things like language evaluation, looking for simple language, plain language use. That's really important, especially for government websites, public facing. Also, provide an easy way for your users to report problems that they have, but don't just put that email on there. Make sure that you have a process, a clear protocol for when you get an email from there, who's going to respond? How do you respond, right? That's somebody's responsibility. Accessibility can also be done if you, on the lowdown, and I just learned about this yesterday. I don't know if Mike is here, but this is a great tool. On GitHub, Simply, but it's SIMPLA11Y PDF crawler. And this is a free tool created by people in the government of Luxembourg that you can use to set up on your back end. Runs in the command line. It's a PDF accessibility crawler. I would go to their GitHub page for more details on that. One of the biggest things that you can do, though, and hopefully everybody has already done this, is have a print style sheet on your web page. If I'm going to hit that print to PDF button on my printer, I want to make sure that I get just the part that's important and not your stupid design elements or ads that push stuff halfway down the page. So use your CSS nicely, get rid of that unnecessary graphics, minimize the color. I should be able to print it in black and white and get the same information as if I'm looking at it on the screen. This little script I have up here is all it takes to make sure that inline links appear as URLs when you print them. Okay, it's not a lot. I also recommend adding a timestamp that will appear either in the beginning or the end of your content in print, just so that you have a way of helping the user, after they print it, understand the age of that information they printed. It doesn't have to be visible on screen, but adding it to your style sheet for print is really useful. And then test your print styles on all your components, all of your content models, formats. Just make sure when you go through a design process that printing is part of that end test phase, because introducing a new style, introducing new design elements may break that CSS in a way that affects that style sheet, and you don't always catch it. So just, print it. This is where I'm a little out of my depth, I'll admit. So this is coming from some of the Drupal developers I work with at ICF Next about some other options that they have used for multiple needs on the back end. So this is a lot of modules or other Drupal tools. PDF generator, PDF tools, those are both modules you can get at drupal.org. Entity print, I know that's a popular one, but think about, with using all of these, what it is that you're trying to do, what is the problem you're solving, and who is you're solving it for. Be cautious with anything that claims to create a PDF from a web page by pushing a button, because the accessibility of those can vary wildly. So you want to make sure that you have done the work there. And then similarly, thinking about how you manage PDF files in the back end in your library. I'm not going to go too into depth to that, because I think that's another more technical conversation for other people. Okay, but this brings us to the PDFs that you are creating with your content, otherwise known as the good, the bad, and the ugly, or search, links, and forms. So let's get into PDFs and search. Again, on the back end, this is coming from developers that I've talked with, but a common approach and a common question that comes up is, all right, I'm going to be stuck trying to use Solr for searching within PDFs. This search API attachment module allows you to set up a view to then connect with Solr. Our developer mentioned this Apache Tika that they use. I also think developing standardized PDF templates within your group can help ensure that you're running this more smoothly, because essentially you're going to specify where certain information exists in your PDF file whenever it's created by your group. And so there's a lot of options within there, but essentially you want to make sure that your title tags, your metadata can all be in a similar place, so that when you're running that search, you're running your index, and you get into details, your Solr will know you can set up your config to understand, oh, this is a PDF that we made because I know it, and so I know this information is going to be here and here, right? So you might not be able to have a global standard, but you can at least have an internal standard for what these PDFs look like. That also goes for the content creators. Having a standardization of how you agree we're going to create PDFs within our group is important, because the content and metadata should be editable. There are times when you don't want somebody to make a Word document and it has that thing that people didn't even know about, like created by and the date that comes from Word, and that goes into the PDF. And let's say that, I don't know, that's the mayor, and the document that came out and publicly has something scandalous on it. That can suddenly be looked at by the metadata, because journalists are really savvy nowadays. And this is how things get revealed that maybe you didn't want revealed, and people lose their jobs. And we don't want that. So make sure that people understand that metadata in a PDF and in all your documents is a thing, and give them an opportunity to look at that. This also gives you the opportunity for your users to bring a common look and feel to all of your documents. And I don't just mean branding. I mean, when we create a certain kind of, let's say an event form, or we create a brochure, the order of information is going to be presented the same way consistently across all of the documents that are from that same type, okay? Also think about your file names, because that's what I will see if I go to download a link to a PDF. Even though if it might not be the link I click on, when I get it, suddenly that file name is revealed in my browser, or when I download it, and that can suddenly make me question, wait, is this the thing that I thought it was? If those don't align, you're creating some cognitive dissonance for your user. So keep track of those. And then I also suggest, if you can, have what we call a gateway page, that it's sort of, think of it as an interstitial or a holding place that provides more context around that file when I go to download it, because that's what your organic search engines can see. It gets that extra context, and especially now that we have these AI-powered search engines, you want them to be able to find that extra context to help validate, yes, this was the thing I was looking for. So all of this is related to workflows. And I think if you take a broader view, the workflows that you use to create content will define the workflows you use to manage that content. So think about these things as an ecosystem, and you have to work together. The more you optimize for one thing, then the less effective you're going to be for other things. This is important when it comes to links in PDFs. So I think PDFs work best when there's a user community who prefers them and expects them, and they exist. And you then have a web ecosystem within that community that is designed to support these PDFs. So as I zoomed in a little bit on my ecosystem before, I I don't know if this is going to work. It says in the middle there, most documents can become PDFs, but not all PDFs represent formatted documents. So where PDFs work, I think a great example is in academic and scientific research. Because everything they do to exchange ideas and information is presented in a PDF, a printed format. It might be, available on the website for their journal or whatever it is, but the core format standard is, here's a PDF. So here's an example of a paper, and there's a little bug in this up in the top right that is actually a little embedded JavaScript button, and it says check for updates. This is something called Crossmark from crossref.org. This allows me to click on this button and say, hey, is there anything new from this research paper? Because it may have been a preprint, it may have something that got out before it was actually finished being reviewed. Click on it and I will get to a website that shows me this box. Yes, this document is current. And if it wasn't, I could open up and find out what has changed. Now, this works off of a REST API. It works within this community because these scientific research papers all have a DOI, which is an indicator that's a unique key, essentially, for that document out in the internet. So this allows this crossmark to tie to that key, and you're always going to have a unique set of metadata related to that. It's up to the researcher, the content owner, the person who created this PDF, to manage and alert when there are updates and send that into Crossmark, but they've built a tool that makes that pretty easy. So this is how a culture, a community that relies on PDFs has understood, yes, we understand links can break and content can change in this, but rather than say move to HTML, we're going to love our PDFs and give them a feature that allows us to handle this problem in a unique way. We can't all do that, though. We don't all have a DOI indicator for PDFs, nor do we want them. So here's 5 basic options for handling this. And of course, option 1, don't create a PDF at all if you don't have to. I shouldn't have to explain it any more than that. But this comes back to making it super easy for content creators to make great web pages. And that's why you're here, right? DrupalCon and Drupal is all about how do we make better authoring experiences and better content with them. So spend some time to remove your barriers to quality. Build a great authoring experience that's simple, that's intuitive. Do regular internal testing to verify that it is simple and intuitive with your content creators. And I suggest even going forward, if you're a bigger organization, try to build a community of practice among your content creators so that they can share ideas and build support for each other in celebrating best practices. And don't just make it for the creators, but involve developers, designers, anybody who's making content should be working together. And that's everyone. It's not just the SMEs. It's not just the marketing and communications people. It's everybody who's connected to building a web page. You can also do a lot in your onboarding with new content editors to make it less intimidating, make it clear that when we create content, we're taking on a responsibility for our audience, and we try to do that with these principles in mind. And you talk about accessibility, you talk about basic best practices, and human-centered content. Then you can empower those content creators with regularly giving them data on how they're doing with their content and help them understand that. Hopefully this is a no-brainer, and hopefully all of you are doing at least some of this, right? Show me your hands and give me hope. Yes. Okay. So the second option, if you can't just make everything a web page, because we can't, you've got to create links in a PDF. Try to aim for the ones that are less likely to change. So if you need to link to a resource, don't link to that subpage that is 3 directories down in the URL string. Try to go up to the highest level of topic level or a just straight up home page if possible. And you can make this part of your content style directory, style guide for people creating content. Also, you could even, you could do a logic check when people add a link and say, hey, this is really long, are you sure? Could be anything like that. News, events, blog pages, linking to those are most risky because they tend to change a lot. Also think about this on intranet. HR, employee handbooks, people love to put links to everything in a PDF, but then a new employee comes in and they start using that PDF and it was just updated 6 months ago, but now everything's changed. So what can you do to avoid that? Make more of those things resources that are web pages. If you need to get creative, short links are useful and QR codes. This would come in handy if you're, say you're a vendor at a conference and you have a brochure that you printed and it's got a QR code, or you want to send people to something. So you can take a shortener link like bit.ly or link split. You can create one short link that is tied to that, but if you use the right tools, you can manage where that link goes through its life. So for example, I want to do a promotion and I create this short link, secret_savings. In May, I could say that if I use that short link, it will go to my summer sale. But I can change the destination of that same link later in the year to go to a different promotion. The user still is using the same short link. It's still the same thing that's on the flyer, but I'm changing where I'm sending them throughout these different contexts. Really important though, is make sure you're using your UTM codes when you do this so that you know the context of where that came from. So if I was here with a flyer, I would make sure that I have a UTM code that says, okay, this is QR source, and it was from DrupalCon Atlanta. Fourth option, you can take PDFs that have a lot of links and take those links and make a dedicated web page that's tied to the PDF. So here's an example of something I worked on. This is a page from a training document from the Office of Child Care that was referring to a whole bunch of resources supporting the training. This clearly should be a web page because those are going to break. So you can create a hub page at your site, at the place where I get this PDF in the first place, and I only have to go to that destination once, and I'll get all the resources from the PDF. So rather than have on the left here a PDF with resources, and then over on the website I get the same information, like doubling it. Here we change that so that instead of a long page of links, we get one link, and it says for resources related to this chapter, go here. And then I go there, and now I can manage those resources, I can update, I can add, I can modify as I want to, and I know it's always going to be up to date. This takes a little bit extra management, but in the long run, I think people end up seeing the value. So those additional resources save a lot of time. It looks like I put some extra slides in here. Let's ignore that. So the website and the PDF now become the combined user experience, and you're leveraging the strengths of both formats so that you have a balance of meeting the user need, but you're also maintaining trust with the user. And then finally, option 5, I guess you would call them miscellaneous, right? Combine any of the above to meet your specific needs. Just make sure that you're deploying things strategically. So ask that question of what format is going to be the most useful for those who need it. I think there's a standard way of thinking that has been, well, a web page is always better than a PDF. But I think we've seen some examples here where that's just not possible. So instead, take a user-first strategy and thinking about how does the person this is for actually use this information. And if you don't know, research that, talk to your users, and then redesign to make sure you're meeting those needs. Also, think about how you set permissions and expiration dates for any PDFs that you would consider secure. It's important that you understand how that works. I'm not going to go into the details, but it's pretty simple with a lot of the basic tools that are there. And again, always remember to measure the effectiveness of what you do. Tie it into your analytics, tie it into your links within the system. All right, let's get to forms. Or not, because that's a whole nother talk. Really? I think, let's admit, right? We could have a whole conference about this. But if you've been paying attention, I think you can guess my answer is that better forms, whether it's PDF or online, anywhere, starts with asking why, right? Do we really need to ask for each of these data points? How are you going to use the information that you're gathering with this form? What is the reason somebody is going to fill out this form? And then if you have to use a PDF form, you have to do what you can to make it useful and set expectations for the user. Think user first as much as possible. I recently did my New York State taxes, and I was surprised to see that they have a fillable form that works with Adobe to do all the calculations for me right there within it. But this warning comes up when you first open it. It says, this is an interactive form, and you've opened it, and here's what's going to happen. So it's communicating to the user that this is not just a standard PDF, and it prompts me to be ready to interact in a certain way. If I don't open this in Adobe, it lets me know I can't use it that way. It gives me this full screen warning overlay and says, if you can't use this, please go get the regular printable form and we will handle it for you. I highly recommend searching for FormFest if you want to get more into the weeds and more specifics about this. It's a great little conference online in the fall. It's happened the past 2 years now. If you search YouTube for FormFest, you'll find the playlist for it. Or go to digitalgovernmenthub.org and search for FormFest there. A ton of great resources and examples, a lot of them from people in public sector dealing with forms and solutions they've come up with, including some new things people are trying to do with AI and forms. That's really impressive. Okay, final thoughts. Content strategy is about putting information where users expect it in the format that they find it most useful. So you have to know your content and your audience and the goals for both of those. Remember in your links, forms, and search, accessibility lines under all of this. And my other little thing I'm just going to throw out there is semantic web and agentive AI is coming. It's already really starting to be here. And your PDFs are not ready for this. None of us are. We have to start thinking about how we structure these, how we provide them, as well as all of our website material. So content strategy means you should be able to answer why make a PDF, know the life cycle for your PDF, how will we manage links in the document, and how will you measure success. I like to summarize this also with you back up your feelings with numbers and back up your numbers with feelings. And also don't forget to choose your battles, right? Sometimes you just have to suck it up and put the PDF on the website and everybody's going to be happier. PDFs are documents with superpowers, and power means responsibility, right? So remember, PDFs are amazing. Your PDFs will be amazing as long as you have content strategy. All right. Thank you very much. And I realize that it's just coming to be a time. I was so behind on revising this entire thing last night that I didn't get a chance to post them, but I will have them available at this link. You can also just come find me. I will have them available tomorrow. Are there any questions? I know we're at time, but we have a little bit of, yeah.
Is it a PDF?
It might be. That's an excellent question. I am going to create a PDF, but I will tell you, whenever I do share a slide presentation as a PDF, I create a special one optimized for the PDF experience. So I don't put in slides that are extraneous. And I make sure that I include description of the things that I say with those slides in print. So that's why it takes me a little bit more time to provide that. Yeah. Yes. So if I hear what you're saying correctly, people are sharing information that's important to how you work together in PDFs.
It's more like you get, like a manual, like a student manual with 100 pages.
Oh, okay.
That can easily not do that, but I can make
Right.
100 pages into a web page. I'll make something that's a 5-page PDF into a web page.
Yeah.
Not 100. So if there was something where we could empower different areas of an institution to get a license for something, we could get people trained on a platform so they could take that PDF content and put it there, and then it lives digitally and it's not frozen in time.
Yeah, no, so I'm getting documents from people, and I don't have control necessarily about how they're making them, and it's really important for them to be able to share it. So here's a 100-page PDF for the student's handbook, for example. Okay, I always start, you're asking about different platforms that might be available. And that's really hard to answer because everybody's resources are, as soon as you have a platform, you have to maintain a platform, right? And pay for it. You have to have people who know how it works. So I always get around that by starting at, don't talk about solutions until you've described the outcome you're going for, and collaborate on defining that outcome. So understand, all right, we're going to try to make this better. Go through and say, well, what are the pain points we feel right now? But then also, what's going really well? And what are the bright spots that we can make brighter? Then you go through and say, okay, who's doing what? Who's creating these things for this audience? And where are they providing it? What tools are they using? Involve the people who make these content, as well as some idea of people who maintain it, like you, so that everybody's at the table together, because people will support what they help create. Then you define essentially, okay, this is our vision of, we will make this thing that provides this for these people so that they can do this thing and feel like this. I think that feel part is also really important. But that's a basic strategy statement that we go for. Once you have that outcome, then that becomes your North Star of, all right, we're going to find solutions that tick all of these boxes that we agreed on are important. And then you start to come up with your other rubric of costs around maintenance and all that stuff. Does that help? Yeah.
I think the 2026
Yeah.
capability or the printing out, and so just the thought of making PDFs accessible by that point is just like absolutely insane. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Often it just comes down to talking to each other about, well, if you do that, then here's what I have to do. Oh, I didn't know you had to do all that. Well, what can I do to make that easier for you? And then you find ways to optimize what they're trying to do.